The devil can cite scripture to suit his purpose, and indeed, Sebastian Ibarra, the Padre of Haywood, certainly does. Once a Valentino like any other, a brush with death brought this priest far closer to God than he'd ever been. So close, in fact, that by 2077, he's almost making a play at God. This fixer blesses and smites the people of Haywood as he sees fit, so long as the price is right. And as much as he tries to tie his righteous book into his dealings, at the end of the day, the only true Lord this man knows is the Holy Eddie. But nothing lasts forever, especially in Night City. And, in the end, the Padre's eventual fate can be framed by a passage that he likely once recited to the people he was about to punish. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Hello, my name is Liddy, and welcome to Shaped by Stories. We're all shaped by stories, both lived and observed, and I hope to see your unique perspectives on the Padre in the comment section. Let's get into it. When the Padre first became a priest, or when he first became a Valentino, is a bit up in the air. But we do know that the Valentinos are a religious gang, with their close-knit culture surrounding specific patron saints, like the Santa Muerte, who is a sort of folk Catholic saint in Mexican culture. She's kind of the embodiment of death and the journey to the afterlife, but also a sort of protective figure. Her worship is actually condemned in real life by the Catholic Church, but according to Wikipedia at least, she has approximately 29 million followers, so the condemnation isn't exactly working. The other saint that the Valentinos follow is a figure named Jesus Malverde, who was almost a Robin Hood type figure in the cartels of Sinaloa back in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. He too is a folk Catholic saint, not officially canonized by the church, and some historians actually debate whether he even existed. Both he and the Santa Muerte are strongly associated with the cartels and criminal doings, but of course that doesn't make every adherent a criminal and/or cartel member. I'm mentioning these saints because I just want to make it clear that the Catholicism that the Valentinos widely adhere to, and, the saints that they consider their patrons, cannot be properly defined and viewed through the same general lens of Catholicism. Now, I myself am irreligious, and I don't know much about many religions. If you do have more religious knowledge or a more nuanced perspective on the Valentinos and Padre in this sense, I would love to read about it in the comments. But my point with bringing this up is that you have to keep in mind that the Valentinos have their own unique religious culture. I think it's safe to say that the Padre's status as a priest doesn't come from your average Catholic church. To a lot of the Valentinos and Haywood in general, the Padre, while he might not be adhering to the Catholicism that maybe somebody in a small town in Canada might understand Catholicism, to the Valentinos he may very well be adhering to his religion in a way that many people in Haywood admire or similarly strive to do. To the gang culture he's from, he may not be that kind of a hypocrite. So I will not be taking an approach to Padre in the sense that, is he a religious hypocrite or not? I don't have the knowledge to make that argument either way. But what I will be discussing is that he is, in my opinion, the weakest fixer in Night City still standing. So, Padre Ibarra was a priest in the Valentinos for quite some time. This is where all of his scars and tattoos come from, and he also admits that he has been to prison. But the event that led him away from that life, down the path of a fixer, occurred, according to official sources, many years before 2071. so we don't exactly know when the following happened. According to lore, the Padre and a bunch of other Valentinos were holed up at a place in Haywood called Motocielo. It was here that a bloodbath occurred, leaving Padre as one of the sole survivors. It was after this that Padre found his way to a more noble calling, that of a fixer. By 2070, Padre Ibarra had become one of the most respected figures in Haywood, both among the Valentinos and the everyday people. But, of course, when there is respect, there is also derision. The Padre was smart enough to know that if he was going to gain power and wealth and influence, and with them security, he would have to secure the loyalty and gratitude of the people of Haywood first. Many of his gigs, in fact, involve delivering justice to those who have done the people of the neighborhood wrong. You take out a cop killer. You take out a retired merc who killed a lot of Valentinos in his prime. Even a corpo executive that got away with a hit and run of a teenage girl. Padre presents his faith in these circumstances like he's a divine punisher or something and you are his sword. But he is getting what he wants out of this too. The Padre prefers to curry favor with the people. There is power in being able to sit safely in a basketball court in the inner city and feel completely at ease among people who could just as easily kill you if they held no respect for you. No other fixer in Cyberpunk 2077 quite does that. And one has to admit that the rare loyalty Padre has, namely from the Valentinos, is quite the thing. It certainly was handy too that he is a priest, and as such, a lot of people already look up to him. However, while I believe that the Padre does believe in God, I don't think he's nearly as fervently religious as his dialogue may suggest. Or at least I think his dedication to his faith has decreased as time has gone on. The Padre chooses his words very carefully and quotes his passages with great consideration. And I think he does this because he knows the religious angle he takes brings him a lot of security. He knows the power of that spiritual position among the faithful. We see it all the time in our world too, religious leaders using and abusing their power for their own purposes. I think his religious belief has devolved into more of a fear of God as he's gotten older, ever since that day at Motocielo. That's just the vibe that I get with his answer when you ask him why he became a priest.
Ask a personal question?
Sure, but I may not answer.
Why'd you join the priesthood?
Faith is God's grace. For many years I did not feel it, but eventually that changed. I believe in God, V, and I only hope that when I pass, he believes in me.
It almost feels like nowadays he just wears that cross like a corpo wears a suit. He recites scripture like a corpo can spout jargon. Also, I want to mention the Padre's initial concept art here. So you can see that he was a younger, much more ripped guy. Like, whoa, the Padre was a daddy once upon a time? But he had more of like a religious getup, you know, with the collar and everything. But instead they went with the older man who's in more of like a clean sweater type look, you know, older. And I will say I do like that they went with the latter look, but the first look, I'm just gonna be like, is this what he looked like at Motocielo? Because I'm like, what the fuck, Padre? You didn't need to become a fixer. You could have, like, become anything else. Like, oh my god. Many Valentinos, even though Padre's more or less left the gang, still respect and do his bidding. We can see this as early as the opening montage of Cyberpunk 2077, where he's at first protected from V and Jackie by some Valentinos, until the Padre tells his people to let them pass. The Padre holds both spiritual and economic respect among the community as a priest and a fixer, and he is very giving and polite to the people who are loyal to him, who do good work for him. And you want to know the other thing about political power and political power games played by characters and stories? My book has that. If you want to read some things about that, you can find it in my post-apocalyptic book. Kaisaria Book 1. Ooh. Anyway, back to the show. But he still has a darker side to him that didn't just vanish with his near-death experience. In the street kid life path, you get a ride with the Padre. He's in the middle of shoving someone in the trunk of his car when V walks up, and he tells his hustle to let the people know in Santo to be ready, keeping in mind that Santo is 6th Street territory, the Valentino's primary rival, who they are engaged in a gang war with. Now, V has seen something that they very well maybe weren't supposed to? I don't really care if V was a useful merc for him in the past, because the Padre he's telling you that he's giving you a ride, even if he is being very polite and framing it kinda like V has a choice. He's posing this like he's just doing you a favor and saying hi to you now that you're back in the city. But I don't know, I'm kind of wondering if he was doing this to sort of test V's own loyalties. Because I think the Padre is extremely paranoid right now. He's doing really good at hiding it, but I think some stuff is going on, and I'm gonna get to that. After Padre and V are pulled over by 6th Street, the ganger who threatens them is named Sam Carter. He boldly pulls a gun on Padre, demanding he pull his Valentinos out of Vista del Rey. Something no one would ever dare to do with most fixers. Like, I can't imagine anybody pulling up on Rogue or Hands. I can't even see anybody doing it to Wakako. After the 6th Street gangers let Padre and V go, every time I say 6th Street, 6th Street, I can't. It's like my least favorite word is 6th. The Padre praises V if you scare them off, saying, "It's good to see you know where your loyalties lie." Okay, so was this a sort of strange test from a man whose throne is crumbling beneath him? Padre then complains about all these new kids in Haywood not knowing loyalty and honor and all that. But to me, that just sounds a lot like an old man who's upset that the world around him is changing, and he's not keeping up with it. Padre brushes off Sam Carter's threats on the surface, saying he's just another nobody who will be gone and replaced by next week. However, the Padre's chillness with this and seeming sort of like whatever kind of thing does not really reflect in his actions. So we can actually find Sam's body later in the game, with a shard on him showing that Padre tracked him down and killed him. The Padre is not a guy who takes insults lightly. He will deliver unto those offenders his holy wrath, as the poor unfortunate Sam found out. One could argue that this is simply a necessity for Padre. He has to flex his power to show that the 6th Street can't intimidate him, that the Valentinos should still respect him. But I actually think that this decision here to kill Sam like this shows his fear. To me, it's a sloppy thing to do, to take personal interest in this random grunt of, by your own admission, no real consequence. Sure, maybe he was lying, maybe Sam is very important, but I don't really see why he would. If Padre didn't actually care about what Sam said, he wouldn't have gone to the lengths he did to teach him a lesson. Unless he's not as wholly poised as he presents himself. In the shard, Sam tells the Padre that he's been sitting on that fixer throne too long, and that it's gotten to his head. And Padre, instead of really saying anything of substance, just starts spouting more scripture. He won't even acknowledge this sentiment that is, in fact, more widely shared around Haywood than he may want V to believe after their return from Atlanta. Throughout the Padre's gigs that V can carry out for him, you can read on shards and overhear conversations where even Valentinos express distaste for the fixer. A number of the gang believes he's outmoded, deluded, and I think the Padre is a bit paranoid of this growing disrespect of him in 2077, and he's just clamping down as best he can. Or, in his mind, as best he can. The question is, why is this happening? It can't just be his age making people look at him and see a weak man. Look at Wakako, for instance. Look at Rogue, despite her anti-aging work. No other fixer is talked shit about quite so openly in 2077 by quite so many gangs the same way that Padre is, aside from Dexter DeShawn. Well, I think the reason why this is happening is rather simple. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. As I said, many of the Padre's gigs do serve to help the people of Heywood, while also lining his pockets with eddies and power. These gigs, I think, all lend to his strategy of staying on good terms with the people of Heywood. He's got a sort of Robin Hoodish kind of rep he's trying to maintain, but more along the lines of the Valentino's patron saint, Jesus Malverde. But on the other hand, a lot of the Padre's gigs involve taking out Valentinos who cross certain lines. In fact, in the mission where you take out the Valentino who killed a cop, you're actually taking out a bunch of Valentinos who are working with Arasaka to start a corporate war with Militech. And that is certainly a big problem for the Valentinos as a whole, especially if any corp ever found out about their involvement. You could argue that the Padre is just trying to prevent major trouble, deliver some justice, and to make a living at the same time. In his mind, he's stabilizing the Valentinos so that no real heavy shit hits the fan. And you know, making money is what fixers do. You can't fault him for that. But I kinda think this is his way of also clearing out potential enemies before they really get fired up against him. Based on the dialogue you can overhear and the shards you can read around Heywood, the old guard of the Valentinos likely holds more respect for the Padre than the younger generation does. You have to move with the times to stay relevant, and by the way Padre speaks of the youth, you can tell he's not. He's not quite like Mama Wells, who I think has been able to continue to stay with things. Mama Wells' name is still strong enough to convince younger Valentinos not to fight in her bar. Even the Padre says that nobody in the Valentinos is gonna fuck with Mama Wells. Padre can't say the same for himself, however. The other thing to remember too is that being a fixer is a demanding profession, and more delicate than it seems. Rogue, I think, says something along the lines of how a successful fixer maintains balance and doesn't rock the boat. You won't be a fixer for long if you start to do the opposite. And that precisely is what happens to Padre, whether he realizes it or not. In one gig you do for Padre, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, he sends V to steal a van from some Valentinos, who he hired to beat the shit out of some nomads who stole that van in the first place because they were doing business on his turf without cutting him in. He says that he will handle punishing those Tinos for taking the van, but I doubt those Valentinos are gonna be super happy with this double crossing he does for money. Some of you might be thinking, well, Wakako kinda does the same thing. She's always screwing over the tiger claws and whatnot. If you watched my last video on her, you might even be thinking I'm being unfair to Padre, which leads me to this next gig. In Bring Me the Head of Gustavo Orta, V is hired to take out said high-ranking Valentino because a 6th Street gang leader blames him for his daughter, Martha, now being in a coma. This seems open and shut at first, given how Valentinos and 6th Streeters are at war. But it's already weird that Padre is taking a gig from 6th Street, given what we've already seen of him and the gang. Yes, fixers do things for money for whoever will pay, we know this. But for all the talk of loyalty that Padre has and complaining about the young, this gig and who he's doing it for makes me kind of go, I can't talk about him being a religious hypocrite, but I will talk about him being a general one. My next point is that Gustavo Orta isn't just some random Valentino leader. He's actually a cousin of Campo Orta, the Valentino's real leader, who is currently in jail. Campo sends a rep to Jackie's funeral to send his condolences for Jackie's loss. But also, we can meet Gustavo Orta at the ofrenda, and the daughter that you're supposed to be avenging in the aforementioned gig. We can actually share a drink with Gustavo. The lady sitting next to him is Martha. And if you scan her, you can see that she is under the name Martha Young, which is a fake name. Her real name is Martha Frakes, and the reason why she's there in secret is because she and Gustavo are secret lovers. It was, in reality, Martha's own gang that put her in a coma when they sent a team to take out Gustavo, not realizing that she was with him. They knew that their gangs were enemies and that their relationship would not be publicly acceptable, so they were trying to keep it under wraps as best they could. If you actually stop to talk to Gustavo during his gig, he will tell you this himself, and all evidence that you can find on his computer and all the shards around Haywood point to his explanation being the truth. His grief is genuine. I also want to mention that Padre is also at Jackie's ofrenda. So it's like these two guys were mourning the same guy one day, and then the next day the Padre is sending you to take him out for the enemy. I know that the Padre says that it's disrespectful to talk about business at the ofrenda and all that, but I'm also kind of wondering, like, maybe Gustavo was always kind of a thorn in the Padre's side. Maybe Gustavo never liked him and didn't treat him with the respect he desired. And so he's like, no, I don't want to talk about business while this motherfucker's down there having a drink with his secret girl. During Gustavo's gig, you either kill him yourself or you can convince him to leave Night City. But in that case, Gustavo actually kills himself after V leaves. Padre is impressed either way, amazed that V was able to get him to take himself out of the picture. Regardless of how you handle this quest, it is set in stone now that the Padre was involved with Gustavo's death. Maybe Campo hated Gustavo and the Padre took the gig because he knew that Campo wouldn't care. But I can't find anything in-game to hint towards anything like that, where it's said that Campo would probably be happier without Gustavo in his way. Gustavo was fighting a lot of the gang war with 6th Street, and if Campo hadn't wanted that, he likely would have had his own loyal guys handle it. And also, if you look at all the Valentino shards surrounding what happened to Martha, the Valentinos loyal to Gustavo are pissed. They want revenge on 6th Street, and they feel bad for their leader for the fact that his girlfriend got caught in the crossfire. So imagine how hell-bent they would be when they find out that Padre took eddies from a 6th Street leader to take out their leader. Wakako has never outright done anything to hit the hornet's nest of the claws like this. Keyword, outright. Padre, no matter how well kept he may think his secrets are, is again being sloppy here. And for what? Did Gustavo talk shit about him? Is Gustavo against the Padre, like so many other Valentinos? Either way, I think it was a moment of very bad judgment. And I think it is one he ends up paying for. When it comes to Cyberpunk 2077's endings, Padre isn't mentioned in any of them, so far as I can tell, except for the Phantom Liberty ending, which takes place in 2079, when V gets cornered by those thugs in the alleyway outside Vic's clinic. A street kid V can threaten them with the Padre's name, but the lead thug just laughs. The Padre is out of power, and while we don't know exactly how this happened, there is a lot of speculation across the internet. Many believe that maybe 6th Street got him, as that's what the Street Kid intro could be setting up. It would make a lot of sense. Sam was very, very bold, and we all know 6th Street could have gotten bolder. Some also say that maybe a corporation ousted him. We see in that one gig that the Valentinos were hired to frame Militech for attacks on Arasaka facilities. V calls out the Padre for knowing more about this subject than he claims to, hinting that maybe Padre didn't take that gig to simply take out a cop killer. Maybe this information is more valuable than he was letting on. Maybe Arasaka found out that the Padre knew far more than he should have, and they moved in to secure their secret. But I honestly think it's more likely that the Valentinos themselves are responsible for his removal from power, considering all the moves that he makes against them, while also trying to manipulate them for his protection. And then you consider the Gustavo Orta stuff, and his loyalty to the almighty Eddie, above all. Combine all that with the already present resentment held by the Valentinos even before V shows up, and you have a guy who has more than dug his own grave. So, yeah, I do think indeed the Padre ultimately reaped what he sowed. I think Padre was not as religious and holy as he presented himself to be, or as chill as he presented himself to be. I think the empire that he sort of carved out for himself came from a place of fear, from that terrible day in Motocielo. I think he wore that cross like armor. He carried those tattoos into old age, thinking that that would buy him loyalty and respect in that gang forever. For Padre, it was unfair that the world was changing. Not unfair of him to think it should stay the same. According to Reddit user Shavod, somebody went into the game files for Phantom Liberty, and they actually found that the Padre was supposed to send V a text, asking them to help him carry out this big, fantastic gig, a job that was supposed to regain his old respect and put him back in the big leagues again. Sound familiar? Whether this was purposefully removed from the game or simply absent because of bugs, we don't know. But it's funny, isn't it? Also, when I think of the Padre telling me to get in the car, I think of Dexter also being the other fixer who says, hey, let's have a chat in the car. And then, well, I mean, never get in a fixer's car with the fixer. Just don't do it because you might probably get a shit job. Also, sort of like Dexter DeShawn, like, Padre doesn't really have, like, a proper base of operations. Like, his base of operations is a basketball court. You could argue that's a power flex move. I don't know. I see a lot of the same sort of things going on with Dex and Padre. And it's interesting that they both end up the same way, sort of, except Padre, I think, is technically still alive. Well, the signs that Padre was losing his power were always there. He hid them pretty well from those on the outside, like V, but like any old person who refuses to change, the Padre ended up a far cry from the patron saints of his people, mocked, desperate, and forgotten. Thank you for watching this video on the Padre. I will say, when I went into doing the research for him and replaying the game, I didn't expect to come out thinking the way that I now do about him. Let me know what you think. Like, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just a crazy cyberpunk conspiracist. I will say, very fun to take a position like this. I had a lot of fun parsing together all the information. Worst fixer next to Dexter DeShawn, not counting Kirk because Kirk is Kirk. Thank you so much for watching, especially to my lovely members. Thank you. I hope you guys have had a wonderful week. Thank you, of course, to everybody for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. See you again in the next one. Goodbye!